I didn't see you there. I was just working on my masterpiece that I totally made myself because I am a master of the arts. And as a master of the arts, I think it's very important to inform you of another masterpiece that I am working on. You see, I am a children's book author and illustrator, and I am currently working on my next book. This book will be based on my two favorite periods in history, the Rococo and the Baroque. They have been my hyperfixation for most of my life. You know, men have the Roman Empire, I have 17th century France. I want my book to be loosely based on these time periods. It is a kid's book, so I will probably leave out the whole guillotine and civil unrest part of history, you know, although that would be pretty interesting. I just want my book to be mostly based around the culture, the art, the fashion, the food, you know, all the fun stuff. Now you may be asking, what is Rococo? What is Baroque? Well, my friend, that is a very good question. Now, in this video, I'm going to try to give you a brief history of the Rococo and the Baroque period, what they are all about, how they're same, how they're different, and why I love them both so much. Now, quick disclaimer before I begin. I am not a historian. I'm just a girl. So if there's any information in this video that I am missing or may be incorrect, please leave it down in the comments. The last thing I want to do is spread misinformation about anything. All my research and sources will be down in the description below, but as we know, the internet isn't always 100% reliable when it comes to any information at all. So I'm sure there's going to be a lot of information that I am missing, but I really tried my best to make sure that everything's accurate, but if there's anything that isn't, please let me know. Now, with that out of the way, let's kick it off to the Baroque period. Welcome to the Baroque. Now you may have noticed a shift in drama, fashion, lighting. These are all characteristics of the Baroque. Listen, I try my best to give you Baroque fashion. I know this is not really what they would have worn. This is giving a lot more like Vampire Bride. It was most likely stuff like this, but I don't have any of that, so this is what you're gonna get. Also, I didn't have wine either, so this is balsamic vinaigrette. And if you see me gagging in this video, it is because of the smell. So, moving on. Now let's imagine we are in the 17th century, roughly around 16 to 1750. You're in Rome and you start to see a change in architecture, music, poetry. The Catholic Church is really doing their big one in Italy. They really wanted to counter the simplicity of the Protestant architecture, art, and the music. See, the Catholic Church was really losing a lot of their followers to the Protestants, so they had to rebrand. They really wanted to introduce an era that inspired faith, demonstrated power, and emotionally engaged people. Because if you got the people, you got the power. Life in the Baroque. Life during the Baroque period varied a lot depending on social class, location, and whether you were in the city or the countryside. Cities were bustling with trade, markets, and artisans. Cultural life thrived in the form of theaters, opera, and public festivals. The wealthy were really obsessed with displaying their wealth. In the countryside, life was agricultural, tied to seasons, and far less influenced by art and luxury. Religion was a huge part of life at this time. The Catholic Church was incredibly influential and extremely powerful, especially in Southern Europe. Religion shaped daily life, art, and politics. There would be no Baroque period without the Catholic Church. Now let's dive into my favorite part of the Baroque time, the art. The art, in my opinion, is the most iconic aspect of this time period. Works from artists like Caravaggio, Bernini, and Rubens were commissioned to create dramatic paintings, sculptures, and altarpieces that evoked emotion and told biblical stories vividly. My local museum has this incredible room with these giant Peter Paul Rubens paintings, and when you stand below, it just seems so grand in front of you, and it's really hard not to be moved by it. And I'm saying this in 2026 with a completely desensitized internet rotted brain. So if stuff like this moves me, I just can't imagine what it's like for a random Italian citizen in the 17th century who's never seen an iPhone. Anyway, it aimed for emotion and drama. The faces showed deep feeling, agony, ecstasy, or devotion. Moments are often captured at the height of action, like a scene frozen in time. The goal was to make the viewer feel as if they were part of the story. For example, Caravaggio's The Conversion of St. Paul shows a man struck by divine light, his body twisting dramatically as he falls from his horse. Use of light and shadow. Baroque artists mastered light contrast to create drama and focus attention. Chiaroscuro, the contrast between light and dark to model forms realistically. Tenebrism, extreme darkness with a piercing beam of light highlighting key elements. This made scenes look three-dimensional and emotionally charged. Caravaggio and Rembrandt often use a single divine beam of light to symbolize faith and revelation, religious and theatrical themes. Since the Catholic Church sponsored much of the art, religious themes were central. Paintings often showed biblical miracles, saints, and the Virgin Mary in glowing heavenly light. Art was meant to teach, inspire, and glorify the church. Remember, this is all branding for the church. Even secular works like portraits or mythological scenes had a sense of grandeur and movement. Baroque art reflected power and glory, especially in palaces and churches. Architecture and ceiling frescoes were filled with gold, marble, and illusionistic detail. Painters used trompe-l'oeil, trick of the eye, to make ceilings open up to the heavens. Buildings were large and imposing, often designed to convey power or religious glory. Everything was curved and the shapes were complex. There was lavish use of stucco, marble, gilding, and frescoes. Sculptures and reliefs integrated into the walls and ceilings. Windows, domes, and openings strategically placed to create contrast between light and shadow. Interiors are designed for movement and flow, often the grand staircase, galleries, and interconnected rooms. Some key artists at the time were Caravaggio, Peter Paul Rubens, Rembrandt, and Diego Velázquez. Okay, now it's time for my favorite part, the fashion. For women's fashion, it focused a lot on silhouette and shape. Full skirts supported by panniers to make the hips extremely wide, tightly corseted waist to create an exaggerated hourglass figure, and low square neckline, often adorned with lace or ribbons. For men, they wore doublets or fitted jackets with ornate buttons and embroideries, voluminous shirts with lace collars and cuffs. Long coats with wide cuffs became popular later on in this period. Some of the materials they used were silks, velvet, brocade, satin, a lot of lace, a lot of embroidery, ribbons, bows, and pearls. They used rich jewel tones like deep reds, golds, blues, and purples. For women's hair and accessories, high elaborate hairstyles with curls, powdered hair, or wigs. For men, wigs were highly fashionable, often powdered and curled. Wide brim hats with plumes were also very popular. Fun fact, powdered wigs weren't just a fashion statement, they also covered a lot of health and hygiene issues, so there's that. Now let's talk about the music. Musicians added elaborate trills, turns, and other embellishments. There was a sudden shift in volume, tempo, or texture, contrast between solo and ensemble. Fugue, a complex contrapunctual composition with interweaving melodic lines. Concerto, typically a solo instrument accompanied by an orchestra, popularized by the concerto grosso, contrast between small group and a full orchestra. And opera. It flourished in Italy, it was dramatic, combining music, acting, and costumes. And here are some very famous composers at this time. Now, there is so much more to the Baroque period than what I've shared. These are just some of my favorite aspects of the time period that I'm interested in using for my book. But with all that said, let's move on to the Rococo. Hello and welcome to the Rococo. Have a look around, stay a while. So what is Rococo? The Rococo period is also known as the Late Baroque. It was the 18th century artistic and cultural movement that followed the Baroque era, roughly around 1720 to 1780. It's characterized by its elegance, its playfulness, its ornate decoration. It was a direct contrast to the grandeur and the drama of the Baroque era. It celebrated beauty, leisure, and the refined taste of the aristocracy, which I am clearly a part of. So let's go back in time. Now imagine you were in France and it's the 1720s. Louis the... What is XB? Louis XV, is in charge, and people are getting tired of the heavy formal grandeur of the Baroque. People were gravitating towards more elegance, leisure, and the pursuit of pleasure. That is one distinct characteristic about the Rococo that I love the most, is this pursuit of pleasure, this laid-backness. Obviously, this is for the rich people who can afford to do that. So they started to do something a little different in culture. If Baroque was grand, dramatic, and serious, Rococo was the exact opposite. It was light, playful, and ornamental, focused on elegance rather than grandeur. The art included pastel colors, soft pinks, blues, greens, and golds, curves and asymmetry, following lines, S-curves, and elaborate scroll work. Many of the themes were love, leisure, nature, mythology, and aristocratic life. Here are some famous artists at the time. I would love to attempt to say their names, but I know I'm going to just upset French people, so I will skip doing that. Rococo architecture was elegant, whimsical, and highly decorative. Emphasis on ornate interiors, palaces, salons, and churches. Here are some famous examples of Rococo architecture. Women's fashion. For silhouettes, women wore hoop skirts, creating a wide triangular shape at the hips, emphasizing their narrow waist. Bodices, tight-fitting, often low-cut, with decorative lace, ribbons, and bows. Fabrics, luxurious silks, satins, and brocades with pastel colors and floral patterns. For accessories, they often wore fans, gloves, elaborate hats, and powdered wigs decorated with feathers, flowers, or ribbons. For men's fashion, they wore fitted coats, knee-length coats with decorative embroidered and lace cuffs, waistcoats. They were worn under coats, often brightly colored or patterned. Breeches, knee-length pants worn with stockings, and wigs. See, unlike the Baroque, I'm going to focus a lot more on the hair and the makeup of this time because I feel like it's just a lot more distinct. I think Rococo style is just a lot more iconic than Baroque. I didn't say it was better. It just seems to stick in people's cultural memory a lot more. And I think it's really because of the colors, the silhouettes. We really haven't seen a fashion movement like it since. But unlike Michel Visage, I don't mind seeing a little Marie Antoinette look on the runway.
If I never see another Marie Antoinette look on this runway, nobody will be happier than me. Rue, I beg of you to ask these queens to stop doing Marie Antoinette. I want to do a PSA to camera. Marie Antoinette and things from that ilk can stop now.
But that's just me. Now for makeup, they often had very pale skin. Very pale powdered faces were the ideal, often using white lead powder, which resulted in serious health problems that affected the skin, and to cover it up, they put more lead powder on. Rouge, bright pink or red blush applied to the cheeks, often in circular or heart-shaped patterns, to emphasize youth and health. For the lips, red or pink lips were usually preferred, often applied small and cupid-shaped. They also used beauty patches. They were these small black velvet or silk patches applied to the face in strategic places, like near the eyes, on the cheek, or above the lip. Each placement could signal something flirtatious or social. They sometimes used white powder under the eyes to brighten up that area. Eyeliner was rarely used like it is today. And these makeup styles applied to both men and women. Women's hairstyles. Rococo hairstyles were status symbols, requiring money, time, and skilled hairdressers to achieve the intricate designs. Height and volume were extremely important. Hair was piled high on the head, often several inches taller than natural hair. Tight curls or soft waves framed the face, with some curls cascading down the back or shoulders. Hairstyles were decorated with ribbons, bows, feathers, flowers, jewels, miniature hats, or even tiny objects like bird cages or ships for the ultra-wealthy. Powdering. Hair or wigs was powdered white, gray, or pastel colors like blue, pink, or lavender to give a refined, luxurious appearance. As for men, their hairstyles were typically wigs, often shoulder length with curls. And like everyone's wigs at the time, they were usually powdered and scented. Now let's talk about the music. Music was highly ornamented, but in a delicate and graceful way, compared to the dramatic Baroque style. Pieces were generally lighter and more cheerful and intimate, meant for salons and private gatherings rather than grand cathedrals. Composers aimed for charm and elegance with whimsical melodic lines and graceful rhythms. Instruments. As for instruments, the harpsichord was very popular, as well as violins, violas, cellos. Flutes and oboes were used to produce these sweet melodic tones, and the piano. The early forte piano began replacing the harpsichord toward the mid-18th century. As for forms and genres, they had galant style. It was a simple, melodic, and elegant music, emphasizing beauty over complexity. Chamber music, string quartets, trios, and small ensembles were popular in the aristocratic homes. They loved opera as well as keyboard music. And here are some notable composers and their music from this time. Now, like I always say, I did not cover everything in the Rococo. If there's more information that you would like to learn, oh my god, please leave some comments down. Tell me what you think. Give me some more facts about Rococo. Now, I did do you all a favor of putting together a little movie list of all my favorite movies. I can't find a lot of movies that are based on the Baroque time period, but there are a lot more based on the Rococo time period, which is great. One of my favorites being, obviously, Sofia Coppola's Marie Antoinette. Well, now that you know a little more about the Rococo period, I must get back to lounging around in my French mansion. Toodles! Wow, what a ride. I really hope this video helped you get to know more about the Rococo and the Baroque time period and why I love it so much. I know there's so much information that I'm leaving out of this video. I'm trying to condense over 100 years worth of history into one little YouTube video, so I'm sorry if I'm simplifying it a lot, I'm leaving a lot of stuff out. But I hope that this kind of like sparked your interest in these time periods, so you can go off and do your own research, follow some of the resources I have in the description below, you know, read more about it, learn more about it. And I really appreciate you watching this video. I am so excited to get started on my next book. It's been like such a dream of mine, and I really want to get started, so I hope you guys stay tuned and I will keep you updated on all my latest. I will also be doing a lot of fun projects related to this. I've already done a Rococo doll. It's up on my TikTok, and I'm also doing another little project, which is going to be a secret for now, but stay tuned for that. I'm very excited to share that with you as well. Alright, so I think that is all for me. If you like this video, don't forget to like this video. Follow me on all my social medias if you want. That is where I keep you updated on what I'm doing, on my fun little projects, so follow me there if you want to. And I will see you in the next video. Bye!